Hey guys, welcome to Reignited and welcome to the C10 with the Hemi swap. So just a couple of words about the truck before we begin. This is a 1986 Chevy C10 single cab short bed. Now, this is a combination that's obviously very, very popular right now. It's something I've been looking for a couple of years to find the exact right candidate. And I looked all over the place, wasn't really having any luck. Everyone wants a ton of money for these things, even if they're complete junk. And then, what do you know? My next door neighbor had one in his shop or in his garage that he was working on as a project. I was able to buy it from him. Thanks, Steve, really appreciate it. But basically, I was so excited to get this thing because it is in tremendous shape. That's the biggest thing about it. It's essentially just a rolling chassis. You got the body and the frame, and that's pretty much it. But there's a lot of extra components that came with it. No engine or transmission because I wanted to put my own in there anyway. But the real reason I picked this thing up is because it is incredibly clean. This is the most rust-free C10 I've ever seen. Okay, so again, this is a 1986 Chevy C10. The reason why it has a new door and a new panel on this side that have been all bodyworked is that apparently it was involved in a minor accident a few years back, and the previous owner swapped those on and did the bodywork, which I'm very happy about because I don't like doing bodywork. That is not my thing at all. Now the front end, he was trying to do a conversion to the newer Suburban style front end. It's not particularly to my aesthetic, so I think I'm gonna swap it back to the stock front end on there. So he body worked all this side as well. And then I managed to put a dent in it like very first thing when I owned it. So that's really pathetic. But so one of the interesting features of this truck is that the previous owner has grafted in I believe it's a Plymouth Belvedere dash. Now, I've always hated the stock 80s dash and these things. They're a terrible dash. They're so plasticky and square, I can't stand them. And I actually really like the center section of this dash, much more than stock. But these ears obviously are going to have to go. He was going to try to mold them in with a door here so that it met up nicely. But for me, they're just a little too constricting. So I'm gonna cut these ears and try to reform the dash edge to make it a smooth transition between here and here. But other than that, I like the dash that's in there. And if you'll notice, look at these floors. Absolutely incredible, not a speck of rust. Rockers, same deal, not a speck of rust in the rockers. Absolutely incredible. The bed as well is in tremendous shape. Just a couple little things here and there, very, very minor. Bed floor, terrific. So again, just spectacular condition on this thing. So it is a rolling shell. It's going to be a major, major project to get this thing finished. So what is my goal for this truck? Well, once I get the Hemi in there and get everything running, what I really wanted to do is I just want it to be a nice street hot rod kind of a deal, just for cruising around stuff. But the ultimate goal is to take it to Rocky Mountain Race Week next year. I don't quite know if I'm going to be able to get it done in time for that. This is my own personal project, so obviously the ones that pay the bills are going to come before that. But honestly, I would love to get it done in time for Rocky Mountain Race Week. All right, so this is the engine we're going to be using for the Hemi project. This is a 6.4 liter Hemi out of a 2017 Ram 2500. Now I picked this engine up because, you guessed it, it has a bad cam and lifters in it. But I think that's all it is, just cam and lifters. And that's okay because I'm going to be changing those out anyway, because I'm going to delete the MDS system. I'm going to put in an upgraded camshaft on this thing. And the ultimate goal is to make somewhere between 450, 500 horse, somewhere in that range. I think for this little truck being as light as it is, that's going to be plenty. It's going to drive perfect. It's going to sound great. I'm using the older 6.4 liter SRT style headers on there. I think they're a really great choice. They flow well. I think they look nice. And they're just a good addition to this particular engine. But I think seeing this Hemi dropped in the Chevy there is going to look really, really nice. I happen to like the aesthetics of the Hemi engine. I don't particularly love the 6.4 liter truck intake, but apparently it does make really great power. So I'm gonna stick with that for now. It should package fairly nicely in there. All right, let's cut to the chase here. So why in the world am I putting a Hemi engine into a Chevy C10? Well, I'm gonna give you 4 reasons why. The first reason is I didn't really want to do an LS because that seems to be the standard these days. We've all seen the LS swaps into absolutely everything. It's getting a little bit boring. I think you guys feel the same way. I have nothing against the LS platform. They are a terrific platform, but at the same time, I just kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. Second reason, I've been a Dodge tech for the last 10 years. So it kind of just made sense to me to go ahead and slap a Hemi in whatever my next project was. I didn't know it was going to be a C10, but once I figured that out, I decided that sounded like a great option. The third reason is I kind of like to irritate the purists. I get a special pleasure out of that when people are like, you can't put a Dodge engine in a Chevy, you can't put a Ford engine in a Chevy, you can't put a Chevy in, you know what I'm talking about. They're all the same and they're annoying. There's no reason why you can't do these things. Now the fourth reason is something that's really special to me personally, and that is way back when I started building my own vehicles and building my own motorcycles, I decided that I was going to use whatever was available to me at the cheapest cost I could get. And that meant using parts from different manufacturers because you can get them so cheaply off of eBay for different things. Now I'm going to link to a build here that I did many years ago. It was a 1980 Yamaha XS650. It's an air-cooled parallel twin engine. And I changed that engine over to fuel injection and I turbocharged it and I ran it using a Mega Squirt engine management system. So it was a huge build and probably a bit too much happening on that one vehicle, but I used parts from 9 different manufacturers in there, including an Audi TT, a Dodge Neon, and a Mitsubishi Eclipse. So in the end, I realized that it doesn't matter the name that's on the parts. If you have some fabrication skills, you can make anything work. And that is what I'm trying to impart to you now. If you enjoy this sort of thing, if you like big projects, don't go for just the bolt-on stuff because then you'll be just like everyone else. Get out there in the garage, buy a welder, buy a grinder, get some fabrication equipment going and learn the skills that are required to do this, because once you do, it opens every door to you. You can build truly custom stuff that no one else will have and no one will ever have. That was always my motivation after that moment. Whatever I was building, I wanted it to be one of one. I wanted it to be where no one could go out and buy that thing. So that is something that's really personal to me, and that's why I like mixing and matching parts so much. So one of the things about a street rod or hot rod or a fun street toy to me that makes it important is having a manual transmission. Just makes it more fun, it's more enjoyable. So this is our transmission that we're going to be using for this project. And the Hemi engine is not the easiest vehicle to find a manual transmission for. They didn't really have a whole lot of options. You can get the truck version that came in the 2500s and 3500s that will bolt up, but that is very much so a truck transmission. It is gigantic, and it is, even though it's a 6-speed transmission, it's way too big to fit in any tunnel. I would have to cut out a huge portion of the floor to build a new tunnel to go around it. And more importantly for me, it's got that granny first gear in it that's pretty much useless anyway. So I didn't want to go that direction. Now the only other option to go with on the Hemi engine is the TR6060 that goes behind the Challengers. And I didn't want to go with one of those for 2 reasons. The first one is they're kind of expensive, clearly, for that sort of thing. But more importantly to me, they use a dual mass flywheel. And that was something I didn't really want in the vehicle. I just wanted a solid flywheel. So what are our options? Well, stay with me because this one's going to get a little bit weird. All right, so what transmission are we using for our project? This is a trans out of a 2006 Chevy Colorado. It is an MA5. And they are reliably using these in like a Pontiac Solstice that has an LS swap, making about 400 something wheel horsepower. So I feel fairly confident that the trans itself can withstand the power that I'm going to be putting to it. In fact, this is actually the transmission. It's an updated design of the transmission that comes in the Mark IV Supra. So that'll give you an idea of the lineage of this thing. So how exactly will we then adapt it to the Hemi engine? Well, that's the tricky part, and that's where we could run into a bit of a weak link with this thing. This is for a 2004, like a 03, 04 Jeep Liberty 3.7 liter. Because the 3.7, 4.7 have the same bell housing pattern as a Hemi. The problem comes in that the bell housing on this thing is not the biggest thing in the world. So I managed to pick up the flywheel for an 0304 Jeep Liberty 3.7. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to use the clutch from the 0304 Jeep Liberty 3.7 liter. I don't know the exact size on it, whether it's a 10.5 inch or what it is. But obviously, as you can tell, that's kind of the weak link of this whole situation. It's going to be a pretty weak clutch behind this thing. Will I regret doing this? Yes, I likely will. But I want to try it. I at least want to try it and see what it does. Honestly, if it ends up that I have to change this whole thing out to go with a TR6060 and go with that style, I don't think it'll be a huge amount of fabrication to swap everything over. So I want to give this a real legitimate shot first, because I do like proving naysayers wrong. And even if you were the one who were wrong in the end, well, at least now you know for sure. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put this thing together. Again, MA5 transmission with the Jeep Liberty bell housing, flywheel and clutch, going on a 6.4 liter Hemi. What could go wrong? Also, here's another feature of using this transmission that I thought was pretty interesting. So again, this is from a 2006 Chevy Colorado. The truck is a 1986, so you're looking at a 20-year difference. And yet, this is the factory drive shaft out of the 86 C10. Look at this. Yup. It slips right in. So there's a chance that we might even be able to use the factory drive shaft on this thing. Of course, we'll probably have to shorten it or lengthen it. All depends on where we're gonna put the engine in. And that's what we're gonna get into in this episode. There we go. Well, I was definitely hoping to drop it all in as a unit together with the headers on there, transmission, everything, just to see how well it would fit. Well, the answer is not very well. Looks like I'm gonna go ahead and have to pull the headers off first. And it also looks like that transmission cross member is gonna have to come out as well. All right, so it's tucked in there pretty well, but our big issue is that we have no room for the exhaust if I keep it this low in the chassis, which isn't really that critical to me. I don't need it that low, but the tunnel for the transmission is the big issue. If I raise the front, I think it's gonna be too much angle on the back of the transmission on the output shaft coming out of there. So I don't want a ton of kickback on the thing. I want it to be fairly level, which right now that's about as close as we're going to get. But I really need to raise the engine up so that we actually have room to get some exhaust in there. Right now, it looks like I would have to custom make some headers on this thing, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's not something I was hoping to do. I was hoping to bypass that by using those SRT headers that I have. But as it sits, I don't think they're gonna be anywhere close to fitting on this thing. It's funny when you start on one of these full-size trucks, it feels like you have all the room in the world, but that's just not true. So even right here, the coil pack on this side would be hitting the booster. So, let me just, we don't have a prayer of that exhaust fitting on here. Ah, bummer. I'm not sure what I expected. Why did I think it was just going to drop in? This is a major swap, and the Hemi engine is quite a lot bigger than the stock 305 that came out of there. So it's good. I prefer the challenge. So this way it's a little bit more unique. Here I thought I was just gonna drop this thing right in for you guys and it'd be one episode and done, engine's in. So I don't know if that's gonna happen here, but let's continue on. I decided to pull the front fenders off because there's really no point in them being on there right now. This way I'll have much better access to the areas where I'm going to need to cut to help get the motor in place. All right, so what I need to do here is I need the trans to be able to go up as much as possible. That'll try to give me a bit more room for the engine up front. So I'm going to go ahead and mark with a center punch 4 holes around this base plate here for the shifter. And then once I do that, I'll be able to see those center punch marks from the top, and I'll be able to cut it with a cutoff wheel and cut that square out, and therefore the trans can go up a little bit more to give me some more clearance. So it's always better to start with less because you can always go more, but going the other direction is very, very difficult. All right, so now I have my 4 marks set. So I've punched those. But the thing is, you don't necessarily want to just drill these 4 holes and then cut straight across, because then for one, you got a big rectangular hole here. But for 2, rectangles allow, if you have a right angle with the metal, that'll allow the metal to fatigue at that corner and it'll eventually start cracking. You really want it to be a rounded edge here. So to do that, you want to go ahead and drill inside the corner here and then step up in bit size until you reach, I'm going to use this bit, which honestly, what is this thing, a 5/8 inch bit. So it needs to go inside a little bit, inside the actual punch marks, so that once it's drilled out, it reaches to the edge here, and then you can cut straight to those points after those 4 holes are drilled. And looks like we're pretty square in there. That's not bad. I'll go ahead and clean up these edges a little bit and we'll jack up the trans and see what kind of clearance we've got. There we go. So we've got our hole cut out. It looks to be pretty square with the transmission, which of course isn't actually mounted yet, so we can kind of position that wherever. But overall, we're looking good for our shifter location. Let's go ahead and jack this trans up and see how it looks. We need to come over just a touch here. Hey, look how difficult that was. There we go. It actually looks really good right there. Well, I'll be honest, that didn't get me as much clearance as I was hoping it would have. You can see it's still very, very tight where the exhaust goes. It basically dumps right into the frame rail. Let's check this side. Yeah, more of the same over here. All right, you guys, so that is step 1 of about 1,000 completed. We got the engine mocked into place. In the next episode, you're going to see me make the actual engine mounts for it. I want to get this thing hung under its own weight, and then we can kind of move forward from there. For now, though, we got the transmission in there in place. It's ready to go. I think there's a couple other things left to do, but we'll get to that in the next episodes. Appreciate you guys watching. And again, I know you love fire, so let's get back to the fire.